Good evening. Hi, everybody. I am Molly Moran from Table Wine in Madison. And tonight we're exploring Oregon, which I'm very excited to do because I was just there a couple of weeks ago. So it's going to be fun for me to revisit these wines and talk to you a bit more specifically based on my trip. So I've only had a chance to do something like this a couple of times because I don't travel that much. So this feels particularly good. And considering the state of things right now, I'm so incredibly grateful that we traveled when we did. So we went after the heat wave, but before the new CDC guidelines. Sorry, something on my screen there. So we were outside pretty much the entire time, and it was wonderful. So, but with an unvaccinated child in my house, I'm glad I traveled when I could. So if you are joining us live, we have a poll question that I would love for you all to answer before we get started. And then the question on the table that only a few of you have answered. I'm curious to know what your go-to birthday dessert is. Not just your dessert, but like if you're having a birthday celebration and your friend says, I really want to bring you your favorite thing, what would be your answer? So answer it up, guys. I'm curious. I want to know. I had to ask my husband this question this week. His birthday is tomorrow. And so I was kind of surprised by his answer. So even though we've been together for a really long time, so I'm curious to see what you all have to say. I am amazed at grocery store cookie cake. Oh, damn, I do love a grocery store cookie cake. Cheesecake. We got a couple votes for cheesecake. Amazing. Chocolate or lemon cake. I like it. I like it. German chocolate. Barb, I don't know what better than sex cake is. Tell me more about this. All right, so while you all answer, I'm going to check out the poll. So it looks like we have a pretty even split between folks who drink Oregon wine sometimes and people who drink Oregon wine pretty frequently. No one who's watching live, at least, answered that they rarely drink it. That doesn't totally surprise me. I figure usually for classes, people sign up for the things that they already know they like a little bit. It's rare that people go completely outside of their comfort zone. But more importantly, Oregon is in so many people's comfort zones that I think that that's really what it is, right? That I think a lot of us can find something to enjoy in Oregon. So let's get into it. You all are discovering the chat now. There we go. There we go. Ooh, Barb, that sounds delicious. Chocolate cake with sweetened condensed milk drizzled in lemon cookies. These all sound great. Turtle brownies. Love it. Love it. Thank you, everybody. I will also answer, as I like to do. I would have said chocolate mousse, but a couple of years ago for my 40th birthday, a friend did say this exact thing. What do you want me to make for dessert? And he makes like the chocolate chip cookies from the New York Times with the flaky Malden sea salt on top. And so he just made like a pile of chocolate chip cookies, and turns out that is what I want. And it was phenomenal. So that's my answer. So if you're watching live, please do use the chat kind of throughout class. There'll be times where I'll specifically ask everybody to kind of give their feedback. But as we're going along, if you have questions, if you want to know more about anything, if you want me to pause and go back to something, please do let me know. So yeah, let's do it. Let's explore Oregon. So some fundamental information to know about Oregon, some of which I find pretty, even though I've taught this class before, I still, as I was revisiting the information, was still kind of amazed. So Oregon is the fourth highest producing state in the United States in terms of wine production. California, no surprise, is first. But in terms of like on my radar and how much wine we sell at the shop, I'm surprised about this next fact. So then Washington is second, and then New York is third. So the Finger Lakes are really doing it. We just don't see much of their wines here in Wisconsin. So Oregon is fourth. There are 22 AVAs in the state, meaning those little areas, specific American viticultural area. So it's a specific place, the grapes that come from that place, wines that are made from grapes that come from that place will have the place listed on them. And about half of those AVAs are within a larger AVA. So there is the Oregon AVA, which would mean, and we'll see that with our first wine, which would mean the grapes can come from anywhere within the state. So these AVAs kind of all fall in, obviously, under that one heading. One thing that's kind of special about Oregon is they are more stringent about how the percentage that have to come from this specific place to have the AVA listed. So in California, it's 75%. So 75% of the grapes have to come from Napa to put Napa Valley on the bottle. Likewise, in California, 75% of the wine has to be the varietal if they're going to list the varietal on the label. So if it says a Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, it means that it's at minimum 75% Cabernet, at minimum 75% Napa Valley. In Oregon, however, when it has the place listed on it, it has to be 90% of the grapes have to come from that specific AVA. So you can know that if it has a specific AVA on it, really that's like almost all of it, right? And probably it is close to 100%, if not 100%, but they do give themselves a little wiggle room. And with the varietal, it's 95%. So if it says Pinot Noir on the label, it really is Pinot Noir. There might be a little bit of something else blended in, but the things that I've talked about in classes prior to this, where winemakers are a little, I don't know, there's a little bait and switch. They'll say that it's Pinot Noir, and then 15% of it is, say, Petite Syrah or Syrah, and the wine is like super big and lush. That's totally game in California. In Oregon, they try to avoid that. So again, you kind of know what you're getting a little bit more in Oregon, which I really do like. In terms of what's the most popular, most widely planted, it is still the Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris game. It is the Pinot game. We'll talk about each of these grapes later and kind of talk about like where things are headed. Patty and Kristen are asking, so when is New York class? I will say New York class will be when, there's enough New York wine sold in Wisconsin to warrant a class. You're not the only ones to ask. Everybody keeps asking, but it's like one winery. So I don't really love to do a specific winery for a public class. I don't think it's like particularly that interesting. It feels more like a sales pitch, quite honestly, than class. It doesn't feel so much like learning. So I'm waiting until there's a variety. And also until you all stop throwing me shade when I put Riesling in classes, because you know what they grow in the Finger Lakes? Like so much Riesling, and everybody keeps saying, I want a New York class. I want a New York State wine, but I only like red wines. Well, you're tough luck then. A travel class post-pandemic. I like this idea. I'm stewing on traveling. I would say Paso Robles will probably beat out New York. Not gonna lie, if I were gonna travel. But anyway, now that I dropped that little thing in there. A little bit of the history of Oregon wine. It's not super long lasting. This is not the story of Bordeaux or something. Wine came to Oregon in the mid 1800s by pioneers. Oh, thanks guys. Look, I already have people signed up for the Paso trip. Anybody else want to come to Paso Robles with us? I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know. It's close to LA. I figure we could fly to LA and drive up and go see some really cool winemakers and eat some good food. Right? Sounds pretty good. Back to Oregon though. So the pioneers brought wine with them. There was wine made in the area, a little bit commercially, but mostly it was at-home consumption, that same kind of story of, a little bit, maybe you sell to your neighbors or something like that, but it's not like an industry at all. Prohibition, completely decimated anything that was happening there in terms of wine. And so it took a little while for wineries to kind of come back. And so they started making wine in the 30s in a real way, in a commercial kind of way. And then it just kind of there wasn't a lot happening within the industry for the next few decades. In the mid 60s, there was a movement, particularly from people who had learned winemaking in Northern California, who, if you can imagine, because I feel like we all say this about Northern California now, it was getting too commercial for them in like 65. Northern California wasn't quite hippie enough anymore. So they wanted to like go further away and be further out in the, backwoods, kind of doing their own thing. And so in the like mid 60s, a group of, quite honestly, like hippies, moved up to Oregon and started making wine. It's around that time that they started to plant Pinot Noir. They realized that they could do something really special with Pinot that was very different from what was happening in California. They kind of realized, like, we're not going to play the cab game. We're going to do our own thing. And so Pinot really kind of became their grape. Again, it still kind of chugged along very slowly. It was only by the early 2000s that the wine industry kind of had its time in the sun. So that's really when prominence came to Oregon. But as we said, it's still only the fourth largest production in the States. So it's not huge, right? It's not a massive industry by any stretch. One through line with almost all of the wineries in Oregon, and there are always exceptions, of course, but there is a really huge emphasis because they were kind of new, because they were kind of coming in the late 60s when organic farming was kind of really kind of coming to the forefront. There are a lot of these wineries have been sustainable from the beginning. Or if they weren't then, they're really turning towards it now. So you'll see certification on a lot of labels from Oregon, even if they don't have the certification, like the Live, which is the sustainability certification. Even if they don't have that, it's very, very common that the wineries are following very earth-friendly practices. So if you care about avoiding chemicals, lower manipulation wine, that kind of thing, Oregon is a really good place to turn to. That doesn't mean that just because it's from Oregon, it's automatically natural. That doesn't mean that just because it's from Oregon, you don't have to do any other investigation if that's something that's really important to you. But it does mean that like you can kind of narrow it down automatically from there. And then the one other thing I wanted to talk about, because I think we'll talk about it throughout, but I wanted to just kind of pause and talk about it before we got into the wine specifically, is the power of climate change on the wine industry in Oregon. So I think most of you are aware that the western coast of our country is basically on fire. And it has been for a few years now. So just like we're seeing in California, wildfires throughout Oregon are really seriously a threat to the wine industry. I think Napa and Sonoma are in worse shape in terms of the immediacy of that threat. I know, for instance, right now, there's the really terrible, I guess it's now kind of starting to get contained, but there was a really big fire in Oregon this year, but it is primarily east of the Willamette Valley, where the majority of the wines are made in Oregon. But that doesn't mean, last year, 2020, on top of everything else, they had wildfires in Willamette. So it's definitely there. It's something that people talk about. It's something people think about. And again, we'll kind of talk about this more in detail as we get to some of the wines where it kind of comes up a bit. The other thing I want to mention is that heat waves, which are very real, right? They were having temperatures in the 100 degrees, above 100 in the Willamette just this year. These heat waves where it's not only super hot during the day, but it's also not getting cool at night. This is not something that I knew until I visited, but it gets very cool at night. Very, like the swing in temperature in Portland, well, at least when we were visiting, was about, trying to think, it was about 30 to 40 degrees. So it was like in the high 80s and then in the low 50s at night, and the cool air comes in, and that's same within the Willamette. So that quote unquote cool air isn't as cool. So what that means from a wine perspective is that the grapes that are going to grow well are going to be different. So Pinot Noir really likes that, what is called a diurnal shift. It really likes going from cool night to hot day and back again. As things just are warmer and they're not cooling down as much, you're starting to see a different flavor profile on Pinot Noir. You're also starting to see wineries choosing to grow different grapes. So while I was there, suddenly people were talking about Syrah, which is not something they were talking about 10 years ago. They're talking about varietals that handle the heat a little bit better. So I just think that from our perspective, all of our perspective, what we can count on is change, right? And I think we've gotten pretty good at that, right? After this last year and a half. So I just think that it's worth noting. So what we talk about tonight may or may not still be true 5 years from now. So if I'm teaching this class in 10 years, it might be a very different lineup than it is tonight in terms of what varietals I showcase. So a map here for everybody. I really struggled to find a more updated map. So this map is 6 years old, and there are new AVAs within the Willamette Valley that have been codified since 2015. And I could not find a good one. The maps really were just kind of not awesome. So I'm continuing to use this one just with the caveat that there are a few that are missing from here. So, take it or leave it. Before we dive into the wines, does anybody have any questions about that fundamental information? Okay, so the way that I picked the wines for tonight were wines that excited me on my trip, things that I think are interesting. 2 of the 3 wineries are places that I visited. And I just thought, let's just have some fun and taste delicious wine. So hopefully, I know that at least Douglas is joining us from Chicago. I don't know if you were able to get these specific wines, but if you were able to shop with us, I hope you have all 3 because you're in for a treat. So if you haven't already poured yourself some big salt, let's do it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the very interesting. I wish I could deliver to Illinois, Douglas. I wish I could ship. I wish I could deliver. But antiquated liquor laws say no. So I apologize. Someday you'll have to come up to Madison. So we're going to talk about Pinot Gris second. But as kind of a little sneak peek at what I'm going to say, because of climate change, because of various other things, wineries are still kind of trying to find the white wine that really will take the world by storm. So what I saw while I was there was white blends. That is a thing. That is a thing that they are doing in Oregon. Very small producers who are playing around with I got a little tiny bit of Huxelrebe and a little tiny bit of Scheurebe, and I'm going to blend those together, and I'm going to put some Riesling in, and I'm going to whatever. And there's a lot of blending with whites that I love. And I totally I get excited about white blends, and they're a hard sell. People don't go in for them. People want to see that it says Sauvignon Blanc on it. They want to see that it says Chardonnay on it. But I say hooey and enjoy some white blends. So this is truly, and this is not just a personal preference. This is everywhere I went, every wine store I visited, every wine bar whose menu I looked at, there was oh, try this blend. They definitely are going in for skin contact. So this wine, this specific wine, some of the grapes have some skin contact and some of them don't. So it's kind of the best of all the worlds. It kind of encompasses everything I wanted to talk about. The particular emphasis, while white blends are going to come from throughout Oregon, there is a particular emphasis on this style in the Columbia Gorge AVA, which is just about 45 minutes east of Portland. It runs along the Columbia River that borders Oregon and Washington. And this is kind of where you'll see kind of just like oddball grapes being grown more and more. These blends often do include some Alsatian varietals. So I just all shamed you all for giving me a hard time about Riesling, and here we are going to taste Riesling again. So they will include Riesling, they'll include Gewürztraminer, they include those kind of Alsatian varietals, sometimes sweet, sometimes dry, sometimes in between. So taste the wine and let me know what you think. To answer Barb's question, food pairing ideas that I have here, fish tacos for sure, pad thai, and yes, pesto with peaches. So like my very favorite thing, I'm having it for dinner in a night or two, peaches, pesto, and burrata, which is like uber creamy, sort of like fresh mozzarella, but even better. Yes, if you have not discovered the world of peaches and pesto, I highly recommend it. And I highly recommend doing it with this wine. So let me know what you think. The minerality is real, right? Kristen's pointing out that peaches are in season, available at the farmer's market. Absolutely true, which is why I'm having it, because I have a whole huge bunch of peaches and a bunch of basil. So there we are. That's what we're having. So this blend is Riesling, Gewürztraminer, a grape that's called early Muscat, which is actually a different varietal than regular Muscat, and Pinot Blanc. So it's Ovum. I know that some of you follow me on Instagram. I posted about a different wine from them called Old Love a little while ago, which was Riesling from them, that I was just like floored by. And then turns out Big Salt is kind of the wine that everybody else knows. I came to it through the back door apparently. But when I was in Portland, Big Salt was, I wouldn't say everywhere, but at the cooler wine shops I visited, Big Salt was kind of like, you know, a thing that you definitely saw. Floral on the nose, roses, all and citrusy, lots of minerals, totally ocean vibe wine, right? Like so much saline. And I also get like a ton of peaches on the nose. I think that it's on the palate, it's very oceany, right? It's very saline and crisp, which again, I think is just like so fun. It's really cool to see winemakers doing these kinds of projects. So this is a husband and wife team. My understanding is that they both work elsewhere and that Ovum is their side project together, but I could be wrong about that information. Is there gooseberry in this? I still don't quite know what gooseberry is. I'll let Patty Grimes chime in if he would like to weigh in on the gooseberry thing. I wouldn't quite say this is in gooseberry land. Nikki, gooseberries are kind of like citrus and green grapes had a baby. He says, no, not tart enough. Yeah. It's like, it's really a New Zealand Sauv Blanc thing. Some French Sauv Blancs too. So I was saying about this wine that it's this kind of like cool side project. And that's what I am taking away more and more from the area is that there's a go for it mentality, like a go ahead and try it. Why not? That's kind of like what I heard a lot, you know, a white blend that I had while I was there, from a winery that's not carried here. You know, I think it was 100 cases of her white and 100 cases of her rosé. And it's like, that's what she's making. And so, it's really fun. And it's a really, I say all of this to plug, like when you can travel, when you do feel safe, it's a really, it's kind of like, I mean, I don't think craft beer I think craft beer is so established now that I won't say it's like craft beer is now, but it's kind of like craft beer was, let's say mid 2000s, maybe late 2000s. Like there's a camaraderie, there's a willingness to experiment. And that doesn't mean just like, let's just like throw stuff in a barrel and not know what we're doing, but it's like, let's just try this out. Katya and Drew are picking up on the softer texture. So the Riesling is skin fermented. So it gives that like little bit of texture, right? Like these are on their own, Riesling, Gewurz, Pinot Blanc. Pinot Blanc has some weight to it. But let's say Gewurz, Riesling, and early Muscat, those are not weighty grapes inherently, but they age them in a cement. I mean, they call it ovum because it's a cement egg, and they're going for that kind of like lovely texture, even though it is super crisp, right? It is super crisp and dry. So what do others think? How do you all feel about white blends? Are you open to white blends, like generally speaking, or do you really need somebody to like vouch for it? Would you pick up a white blend just willy-nilly? Not willy-nilly, but from me, yes. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I suppose I'm not willy-nilly, yeah. Yes, definitely. We're drinking more and more whites and white blends. Cool. White Bordeaux, yeah, right? I think that that's like a great example. Nikki's saying she would never pick up a random white blend. And I think that, Nikki, you are in the majority, for sure. The number of times I will taste a white blend at the store with one of my suppliers and be like, I totally love it. But like, unless I'm physically here putting it into people's hands, it's just going to go die on the shelf. It's kind of sad. You know, sometimes I mean, that's what a wine bar is really nice for, right? I'll put those things on the glass list so people can discover them. But it's just so funny because insider baseball here for a hot second. White blends are a very hard sell. Red blends, like red blend, like you could just, it doesn't even matter. Like it could just say red on it and people would be like, oh, that's a cute label. I'm just going to pick that up. It's just really funny how that happens. I'm heartened to see that Katya and Drew are saying that they wouldn't grab a red blend either. Great. You don't have to. And I don't mean to shame anyone who's not. I'm just curious. I just want, I just want to know what's going on inside all of your heads. So Barb asked the question, how do they decide what to put on the label? Oh, how do they decide whether to list the blend on the label? So the thing with labels are that if you put something on, labels have to go through ATF approval, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms approval. It's decently stringent. So you have to be able to prove anything that you put on there. Once you've gotten it through approval, you're not super keen on having to get it through approval again. So for example, if the only thing that's changing is the vintage, you can feel pretty safe. Like I know, like in terms of timeline, I know that I can get that to the ATF for approval and the label will get approved because it was approved last time and blah, blah, blah. And we can just like kind of keep moving down the road with the production. If you are going to list your blend, well, then your blend either has to stay the same year from year to year, or you're going to have to go through new approval every time. And you risk something that got approved last time not getting approved this time. You risk, whatever. That kind of stupid bureaucratic stuff. So there's like that very real boring logistics answer. There's also the sales marketing answer, which is like, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean to speak for all of you, but this, I think we can agree on, is a cool, eye-catching label, right? Maybe for some of you, it's a little hipster, but it's generally like, it's kind of cool. The winery is called Ovum and the label's in the shape of an egg. Okay, kind of cool. When you read the back, it tells you what it's going to taste like. And you're kind of like, ooh, cool. Okay, it's kind of salty and it's made from ancient ocean soil. Oh, fun, cool. I'm going to buy it. Maybe. If it said Riesling, how many of you would put it down? Like a lot of you. And right? And I don't mean that meanly. I just know that last time I did blind tasting just recently, and everybody was like super grumpy at me because I used Riesling. And so I think that people would see, early Muscat. I don't even know what the hell that is. Or is that a typo? Because they must mean Muscat. Oh, Gewürztraminer? I had one of those one time and it's sweet. And so I think that there's also that, Barb, from a very realistic standpoint. They want to sell the wine. They want to get it into your hands. And so they're going to tell you the information that's going to make you buy it. Ovum, are phenomenal in terms of the information that they are willing to share. So if you go onto their website, they will tell you literally everything you could possibly want to know about this wine, which I think is awesome. But that's for the person who wants to dig. And for the person who's just going to buy based on a label, they're going to tell you what they want you to know. I hope that answer helps. Alexis says that she loved the blind tasting and you wish you'd been there to do it live. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm not going to say that people who watched it live didn't appreciate it. Just felt like I got a lot of shade thrown at me. A friend who is not watching, I don't think is in class tonight, a friend who did not watch it live, watched the recording of the blind tasting, like accosted me about the fact that it was Riesling. I was like, dude, come on. Riesling is an amazing grape. Like, let's get over it. Okay, before we leave white blends, any questions about this specific wine or kind of picking them out? I will say that I understand the hesitancy in terms of sweetness. I think that that's a real thing that it does take, your bartender to have actually tasted the wine or be willing to at least pour you a taste. Your wine shop person knowing the wine a little bit, because they are these varietals that can vary so drastically in sweetness, that I completely understand the hesitancy. So, maybe stay open, or at least don't rule them out if you're engaged with someone who seems to know what they're talking about. Nikki asked if I visited that vineyard and winery. No, that's the one that I did not. The other two I did, but Ovum I did not. I just saw their wines everywhere. And I just recently fell in love with the Old Love. And so I just thought it was a really beautiful example of kind of what's cool, what's happening, what's going on the coast. Catherine's asking dry Riesling. For the blind tasting, Catherine, not all dry. That's why people got mad at me. I still think you all should do it, even though now you know the grape, but you should go back and do it anyway. All right. Are we good moving on to Pinot Gris? Okay. So pour yourself some Pinot Gris if you haven't already. Pinot Gris, our friend Pinot Gris, it was first planted in Oregon about 50 years ago. And it has struggled over the decades. There have been times where it has felt like, oh, now this is going to be the age of Oregon Pinot Gris. This is when it's going to hit. And then it just doesn't. The market forecasting says okay, now's the time. And then it just doesn't hit. It's around. It's there. You can, usually find one when you're out shopping for wine or ordering wine, but it's just it's never really taken hold the way people have kind of expected it to. Pinot Gris is grown throughout the state. So if you'll remember the map, the Willamette Valley is south of Portland. And then there's the Rogue Valley even further south from there. And Pinot Gris really is grown throughout. It's even grown in the eastern part in the Snake River Valley. It is grown throughout. I would say there's a special emphasis on it in the Willamette Valley, but more than 2/3, actually more than 3/4 of the wine in Oregon is made in the Willamette Valley. So when I'm talking about Oregon, it really is kind of a Willamette Valley show. I've taught this class previously kind of in a geographical breakdown and talked about the different regions. But I really just wanted to get to focus on places that I'm kind of currently really digging. So we're going more varietal based tonight. Pinot Gris from Oregon, I did do a class not too long ago on Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio. So you can take that class and kind of learn more about those things, the differences between them. But generally speaking, Oregon Pinot Gris are known for having tree fruit flavors and aromas, whether that's apple or peach, and kind of lots of places along the way, often floral or spice notes to them. So the food pairing suggestions here are for this specific wine. They're not just like general blanket Pinot Gris food pairings. So if you've ever really talked to me about wine from the United States in any capacity, I'm sure that I've mentioned Teutonic to you. Because they're one of my true and deep loves. This is about, let's see, a quarter of the wines that I tasted when I went and visited Barnaby there in Portland. So Teutonic is located in the city. So they are what? They buy grapes and work with farmers in the Willamette Valley and in the Columbia Gorge. And then they are making the wines in Portland. Barb is saying that they feel like you market to men. It's a very curious thing. So the person who does all the design is named Olga, and she's Barnaby's wife. This label, so they're kind of changing their labels, but the whole emphasis on Teutonic, without like going into like a Teutonic spiel too much. His love and background is in German wine. So those labels originally, those are kind of like the original labels, were food pairing ideas. He was really like all about like the kind of food that you would eat with the wine, which again, here, he has like a seafood line. So you can kind of see that front wine is like crab. And then there's like sea sponge and stuff. And so like he has like wines that are meant to be paired with seafood. And so they have the seafood on the label, and then they have like a whole other range of wines. So I hear you. I'm not going to deny that, like, they're not my favorite labels, but people freaking love them. But I will say that having spent an hour and a half drinking 30 wines poured by Barnaby and having met him many times before that, that's not his vibe. That's not to say that there's not, you're not picking up on something that maybe is there, but it's very much a husband and wife team, for what that's worth. Wine? Wine, anyone? See, Alexis thinks their wines are adorable. Yeah. I mean, I think some of them, like the Jazz Odyssey label that has Barnaby playing a tuba, I adore that one. The pheasant ones aren't my jam, but I have sold a lot of that wine based on the fact that it has a pheasant on the label to men and women and folks whose gender I don't know. So, How's Pinot Gris? What do y'all think? This is for Drew. It is not for Katya. Apricot, a great acid level. Love it. Great. Katya, I'm curious what it is that you don't like about it. Peaches and apricots, aromas and palate. Yeah, for sure. So I think that if you close your eyes. Oh, okay, good. Okay. Kristen and Patty just nailed it. Okay. I was going to say, if you close your eyes and you really, really concentrate just on smelling this wine, I think that there's a flintiness. Like you're trying to get a fire going and all you have is two rocks. I think that there is a slight, gentle smokiness. Some of you have had other Teutonic wines from the 2020 vintage, either in class with me or just have taken them home. The wildfires are very real. The effect that they had on the grapes is very real. The two wines that we are I should say Adelsheim 2016, the Pinot Noir that we're going to taste was not affected by wildfires, but I will say that the two wineries that I visited, Teutonic and Adelsheim, they have very different approaches to this. Teutonic is like, it's a sign of the vintage. I'm not going to do anything to get rid of that smoke. And Adelsheim is like, we want to make pristine wine. And so we're going to do, we're going to use methods to avoid smoke taint. Two different schools of thought, right? I think one is a newer school of thought. One is an older school of thought. I think, I can definitely respect Barnaby's position of like, hey man, like this is what these wines are going to start tasting like, because these fires aren't going away, right? This is not his first vintage having to deal with this. So, some of the wines, it was almost mezcal-y, like very smoky. I don't pick up on that so much here. I think that this is definitely more subtle. We liked it with risotto and a salad, but not with salmon. Okay, that's fair. And Katya's saying that it's too fruity for them. Which, okay. That's fair. How do others feel about it? It's definitely not your grandmother's Pinot Grigio, right? It's fruity and it's high acid, and those are the Teutonic calling cards. If you don't like fruitiness, and you don't like, or you don't like acid, these wines probably aren't for you, because like that's what they are into. If you look at the label, it's pretty low in alcohol. It's like 11 and not even quite 11 and a half. The reason that I poured it second is because of that fruitiness. I knew that it was, too fruity, just veering on the sweet side of things to start with. But it is, it's kind of the Teutonic way. So if you find yourselves in Portland, I think, Indian takeout would be great with that. Yeah. And like, that's the thing, right? If it's too fruity for you, like Katya, for example, you now have this open bottle at your house. Drew likes it. Maybe Drew's just going to drink it and you don't have to worry about it. But if, for example, you, I don't know, want to split the bottle or keep, whatever, this is a perfect time where get some spicy food and see what happens. Like, see how very, very, very different this wine will taste, how that level of fruitiness will help you, So, no, there's no oak. There's no oak. It's all stainless. Alexa says, kind of irrelevant, but it's the first time I've seen an ABV with that specific of a percentage. Yeah. I can't think off the top of my head of anyone else who includes the 100th, what chemists do they have working for them? Well, the funny thing is that like the test that you run to do ABV is going to give you that information. Like, it's not like Barnaby runs a different test than everybody else. He's running the same test. It's just that he's willing to disclose that information. So I don't know. I think I find it super amusing, right? Like, these wines come in and I'm like, oh, okay. 10.31%, I love it. Whatever. Catherine asked the question of Gris versus Grigio. So really basic answer, Catherine, is language. So Gris is French, Grigio is Italian. They both mean gray. Pinot Gris / Pinot Grigio, same grape, is not a green grape. It is a gray grape. It's if you ever see it growing, you would think it was a red grape. Like it got a lot of color to it. My husband got a skin contact Pinot Gris while we were in Portland that he was like, legit, like, no, that's the red. And I was like, no, it's really not. But it was there. It had spent like 3 months on the skins and it looked like Gamay or Pinot Noir. So that's the difference. I don't know if Ellen Carlson is still on tonight, but Ellen went to Portland actually before me and visited Teutonic. So maybe Ellen, if you have anything to add about them going to visit and stuff like that. I know that she shared with me that they were very generous and had a really, you had a really good time at Teutonic, yeah? Like you had a really nice visit? Super fun. Yeah. I would really recommend it. When I was there, there was another group, I think just like a normal group from the public and they got to taste so many wines. They're so generous with that stuff. And Barnaby does make like a bazillion wines, right? You saw the little bit, just a little tad bit of my tasting. So you can definitely go and kind of taste a lot of different things. So that's my plug for that. I know that people often ask me, where should I go? So this is your answer to that question. All right. The only other thing I wanted to say about Pinot Gris before we leave it, because I mentioned that it's kind of like struggling to find a foothold. So we were seeing the white blends, kind of like that's a thing that's happening. Maybe that's going to catch on as climate change is happening, as wineries are kind of re-examining what we make and why. Are these the right grapes for this area? More wineries are turning towards Chardonnay. So I think that we might see less Pinot Gris coming out of Oregon. Hopefully what that means, what that usually means, is that then when you do see it, it's really good. So that's my hope for kind of where the direction that the industry is headed. In Burgundy, France, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are grown together. Pinot Gris grows in Alsace, which is a very different climate. So kind of the idea that the same place that would grow Pinot Noir would grow Pinot Gris doesn't really make sense from a climate standpoint. So we'll kind of see where that takes us. The fruitiness here is coming from the warmth, right? They're ripe. They're very ripe grapes. They're more reminiscent of California than they would have been 10 or 15 years ago. Okay. It's time for Pinot Noir. If there's one grape that you probably have ever had from the state of Oregon, I would assume it's Pinot Noir. It has really been dominant since the 60s. So it was planted there. Like I said at the beginning, it was kind of planted there to see how they could differentiate themselves from California. They realized back then, now obviously we're talking, almost 60 years ago, climate was very different there. So it was much cooler, but it was much more like Burgundy. And so that's kind of what led them to do that, to start growing Pinot Noir. And then they realized like, oh my gosh, it's just beautiful and very exceptional when it's from this area. It is like all of the wines that we're tasting tonight, it is grown throughout the state, but it is particularly renowned from the Willamette Valley and all of its sub-AVAs. So I mentioned at the beginning that most of the AVAs are within kind of the bigger regions. This is an example of that. So this is Chehalem Mountains, which you'll see, you can see right under the name of the winery. Chehalem Mountains is an AVA within the Willamette Valley. If you enjoy these wines, if you are like, oh my God, I think Oregon Pinot is my thing, you can really start to get specific about which AVAs you like more than others. You'll learn what style you like. They are similar, but there are nuances, right? That's how they get to have their own AVAs. There are nuances within each of them. Generally speaking, Oregon Pinot Noir is known for black and red fruit, leaning more towards black than red at this point. Some good earthiness and spice notes. I think some of you have heard me beat on this drum like a million times, which is they used to be earthier than they are now because of the warmer temps. The grapes are getting riper, and so you're kind of losing that kind of earthiness, but I think that in a well-made wine, it's still there. Catherine saying that she smells the smoke in this one. That I think is less like the wildfires. I mean, I can say assuredly it wasn't the wildfires because it was not, there weren't wildfires this year, but that is still a legit tasting note or aroma that you can smell in Pinot Noir. So it's definitely some of that, you know, kind of like wet earth kind of thing. You'll notice that I put salmon on all of the food pairings because salmon is so ubiquitous in the Pacific Northwest. Here, something like a blackened salmon or grilled, something with a little bit hardiness could definitely hold up to it. Roasted duck, barbecue. Barb says she wishes she could send us pictures of your faces while you're drinking this one. Well, that's what Instagram's for, friend. Take a picture. Come on. Tag me, hit me up. I'm a little speechless. So what can I say about David Adelsheim that doesn't sound too crazy fangirl? He was part of that kind of original crew in the 60s and 70s. Adelsheim Vineyard or Winery has been in existence. They celebrated their 50th year anniversary this year. So they've been in operation since 71. He is definitely part of that original group of people who are just like, I'm going to go try some things out and see how Pinot Noir goes. This specific wine is made from 11 different plots of land that they blend to make like this exact blend. Not that it tastes like this every vintage, but this is like kind of what they're going for. Tell me what y'all think. This is so one of the coolest parts of my visit to Adelsheim was that this is breaking ground, right? And so this is 11 different parcels of land. And then I got to taste 4 of those parcels of land that they made into single vineyard bottlings. So those are in here. So that was like pretty cool. I just thought, you know, it was really fantastic. We're both big fans of this wine. Love the savory flavors. What we think of classic Pinot Noir. Absolutely, right? I think that it is quite classic, right? I'm so glad to see you all just being so excited. Everything I love about Oregon Pinot. Completely agreed. Catherine's asking about smokiness in the finish. I get spice, but if you get smokiness, that's totally fair. I get kind of like almost a nice like acidic spiciness to it, which is why my suggestion was for barbecue. I just think that like that spice mimicking the spice in the food is really great. I wish, Ellen, I wish I had gone before you because I can't speak highly enough for the visit that I had at Adelsheim. If you are ever planning on visiting the Willamette Valley, like you have to go there and you have to tell them that you shop at Table Wine. I had just like the most amazing visit. And I am aware that when I go to visit a winery, I have a different experience than you guys would have. Just like, you know, I don't know, whatever you all do for your jobs, you know, you have insider knowledge, right? That I don't have. And so if I went to do some part of your job, it wouldn't be the same for me, right? Like, I think that's fair and that's okay. But I think one of the things that I loved about it was that it was like just the right amount of fancy. And it was just the right amount of like, I could look around and see just the folks who just like driven up, just came in. They were also having a really amazing visit, right? And it was, they were getting to look at those same beautiful vineyards and stuff, right? I'm not going to say that they're going to necessarily, you know, pour all the things for you that they poured for me. But I know that you would have a really wonderful visit. So for what that's worth, I can't speak highly enough about it. Are any of the wineries I visited dry farmed? I can say for sure that Adelsheim is. They are live certified on the back. And they talked a lot about their sustainability practices. And Barnaby at Teutonic, he falls into the natural wine category. So he really is very hands-off. So he never said specifically whether it was dry farmed. But that seems to be the norm. The kinds of places that aren't are kind of, they're the weird outliers. So I would also assume that Ovum would follow into that as well. Adelsheim's the only one that I can assuredly say 100% yes, but I think that all three of these wines would most likely fall into that category. Yeah, they really, it's deserty out there and it's really hot and they're very aware of those kinds of things. So irrigation is not something that they're interested in, right? They want to do this in a sustainable fashion. So, everybody was waxing on about this wine. So two things. One, I guess, is there anybody out there who doesn't care for this Pinot Noir? Because I'm always curious. I know that it's hard to kind of like speak up and say like, no, I don't like the wine when everybody else is being so happy about it. And then the other thing that I was going to say, and this does, I think that any of you who know me know that this is going to pain me to say this. Sometimes it's worth it to spend a little more money. I wish that I could find a $15 bottle of Pinot Noir that tastes like this, but I can't. This wine is 5 years old and this is the current release. This is, all within the Chehalem Mountains AVA, which I know that I love. I particularly like wines from that area. It's made from like just an incredible woman winemaker who's just like so freaking gifted. So gifted. Her rosé this year is just ridiculous. So it's like, yeah, sometimes you're going to spend $45. But it's really good, right? Katja and Drew are asking, Pinot Noir is difficult to grow, right? Yeah, it is. It is. It's a fickle grape. I mentioned that it likes those kind of big swings in temperature. If it doesn't get them, it can, all sorts of stuff can go wrong. It's a thin-skinned grape, so it can burst if the grapes get too ripe. It's a little prone to mold. So that's another reason why you tend to see Pinot Noirs carry a slightly higher price point, because wineries kind of have to have like an insurance policy, basically, because the stuff might go wrong in the vineyard. Somehow we're already at time, and I feel like we just are just getting to this like I'm just really focusing on this wine, but that is life. I'm curious to see. I'm open to having people tell me their favorites if people like to weigh in. I know that people often like to weigh in with their faves, but I don't need you to. If there are questions about Oregon, generally speaking, wine trends, geography, history, that kind of stuff, please shout them out. I'm here for it. Alexis is asking if I will have more wines from Adelsheim, or can we order them with me if you have recommendations? Yeah, so I don't have, beyond this, I don't have anything slated to be on the shelf. If I can get my hands on some rosé, I probably will, because I really just love it so damn much. They have one of the single vineyards, the Ribbon Ridge Pinot Noir is available, and then they have kind of their entry level Pinot, which I'm trying to remember. I used in this class a few years ago when I taught it. So that was so that's also available. And I believe their Chardonnay is available. Their Chardonnay is lights out. It's delicious. It's absolutely amazing. So yeah, for sure. I might not have them on the shelf, but you can hit me up anytime and I'd be happy to check stuff out for you. Katja and Drew asked if I could have added a fourth wine, what would it have been? Ooh. Well, that's a good question, because like if I had, so one of the things that is tricky is that like I got home, right? I really wanted to wait until I got home to pick the wines. But that meant then that some things weren't available anymore, because I really, really would have loved to do a Teutonic Adelsheim 2020 rosé side by side, because I don't think you could find two more different wines that are made from Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. Like, they are just so totally different. It's fascinating. So I probably, so I couldn't have done that because the Teutonics all gone for the year. If I were going to add a fourth one into the mix, I probably would add rosé, because it is something that they definitely are seeing success with. The wine industry in Oregon. They're definitely noticing that, like, hey, people like Pinot Noir rosé, people like our Pinot Noir rosé, and they're willing to buy it. So I think that would be the one I would have added. Wine Valley says rare, but Tempranillo from Southern Oregon. Anything we'd ever see in Wisconsin. So funny you should ask, Kristen and Patty. As I was reviewing my notes from the last time I taught this class, which was in 2019, I believe, I actually poured a Tempranillo from Southern Oregon in that class. I don't believe that it is available anymore, which is one of the reasons that I don't carry it. If you want me to check on it, shoot me an email and I'd be happy to see if it is still available. There's a teeny tiny little bit. I've tasted two from two different wineries and they're super cool. They're really good. They're riper than Rioja, and they're not going for like super aged and oak kind of flavor profile, but they're really cool. Any other questions? These are good questions, guys. Well done. Any other questions? I will say that taking a few weeks off from teaching because of scheduling conflicts and stuff. And then my hope had been that we would resume in-person classes sometime once the school year started. I do not feel comfortable doing that at Table Wine. So I'm going to just keep going with virtual. I know that you all who are watching now are probably okay with that because you joined me for these virtual classes. So I hope that maybe some friends can come back into the fold, join us again. So in September, I have Cabernet Sauvignon class, which will be really cool. I really love to teach things that are outside of my own personal comfort zone. I think that they are the classes that I teach the best. As excited as I am for tonight, I think that like when I have to really like dig deep, you end up getting a better product. And then we're going to do one of those component tasting classes where we have the actual item and we smell it and we taste a wine that has that flavor or aroma. And we're going to do it with earthy things, like dirt and mushrooms and things of that sort, savory kind of things. This was a request a very long time ago. And then I waited on the seasonality because it felt like maybe that's a fall thing, less than, middle of July. So join us for those. I think they'll be really fun. Any other things before we go? If and when travel happens, hit me up and let me know. I'm happy to reach out to Adelsheim, Teutonic, Ovum, or any other winery that we work with, and tell them that, you take wine classes and that you are interested in coming out for a visit, and I'll put you in touch with the people. So let me know. And Barb, I want to see a picture of what you looked like when you were drinking that Pinot Noir. And anyone else, I want to see what happy faces everybody has. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. I'll see you guys soon.